Have you ever watched a woman change so completely that the world around her feels unfamiliar? Not louder, not colder, but quieter in a way that unsettles everyone who once believed they understood her. There comes a moment in the psychological evolution of a woman when something within her shifts, and the shift is irreversible. She does not announce it, she does not warn anyone, she simply stops caring in the way she once did. This is not apathy, this is not cruelty, this is awakening. In Jungian terms, this is the moment the queen archetype rises from the ruins of the wounded girl, and when she rises, the entire kingdom trembles. In the early stages of life, she is conditioned to please, to soften her edges, to earn love through sacrifice. She learns that approval is survival. Her empathy becomes her currency. She studies faces, tones, moods, adjusting herself like water poured into different containers. This is not weakness, it is adaptation. Yet beneath this adaptation lies a silent resentment. Every time she silences her truth to maintain harmony, a fragment of her shadow grows stronger. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow as the denied self, the rejected impulses, the parts we bury to be acceptable. For years, she buries her anger, her ambition, her refusal. But the shadow does not disappear. It waits. The queen stops caring when she finally integrates that shadow. Integration does not mean becoming heartless. It means she no longer abandons herself to secure love. The shift is subtle at first. She no longer explains herself excessively. She no longer chases closure. She listens more than she speaks. And those who benefited from her emotional labor begin to feel uncomfortable. They sense the withdrawal of something they relied upon. Her silence feels heavier than her words ever did. This is the first tremor of awakening. When a woman stops over-explaining, stops over-giving, stops over-apologizing, she reclaims psychic energy that once fed others. But here is where dark psychology reveals its deeper layer. When she stops caring about validation, she becomes unpredictable, and unpredictability is power. For years, people learned how to trigger her guilt, how to manipulate her empathy, how to pull her back with promises or accusations. Now those strategies fail. She observes without reacting. She hears criticism without absorbing it. She sees manipulation without confronting it. The queen understands something profound. Reaction is surrender. The moment she no longer reacts impulsively, she controls the emotional field. Others may interpret this as coldness. In reality, it is sovereignty. There is always a moment in the middle of this transformation when doubt tries to reclaim her. The old identity whispers that she is becoming selfish, distant, unlovable. The world often punishes women who detach from expectation. Friends question her change. Partners accuse her of losing warmth. Family members call her dramatic, and for a brief, dangerous period, she wonders if they are right. This is the psychological battlefield. The ego fears isolation. The shadow tempts her with anger. The unconscious tests her resolve. If she collapses back into pleasing, the awakening dissolves. If she endures the loneliness of transformation, she crosses into her final form. What makes this stage terrifying to others is not her silence, but her clarity. She begins to see patterns she once ignored. She recognizes emotional manipulation disguised as love. She understands how often she confused intensity with intimacy. She stops romanticizing chaos. And here is the unsettling truth. When a woman fully sees, she cannot unsee. The illusions that once sustained relationships fall apart. She does not argue about them. She simply withdraws her participation. That withdrawal feels like abandonment to those who depended on her unconscious compliance. But to her, it feels like oxygen after years underwater. The queen stops caring not because she has no heart, but because she has finally placed her heart under her own protection. She does not chase revenge. She does not seek to dominate. She simply refuses to shrink. In Jungian philosophy, individuation is the process of becoming whole. Wholeness demands confrontation with the shadow and the courage to live authentically afterward. When she reaches this stage, she no longer seeks to be chosen. She chooses herself, and that choice shifts the power dynamic in every room she enters. This is only the beginning of her awakening, and what comes next will challenge everything she once believed about love, loyalty, and identity. The second stage of her awakening begins in silence, but it matures in detachment. Detachment is often misunderstood as indifference, yet psychologically it is the highest form of emotional discipline. The queen does not detach because she feels nothing. She detaches because she feels everything and chooses not to be ruled by it. She begins to observe her emotions as symbols rather than commands. Anger becomes information. Jealousy becomes revelation. Sadness becomes depth. Instead of reacting, she reflects. Instead of collapsing, she studies. This inner shift transforms her from participant in chaos to architect of her reality, and those around her begin to sense that she is no longer accessible in the same way. As she grows more self-possessed, the people who once relied on her emotional availability feel a strange anxiety. They test her. They provoke her. They attempt to awaken the former version of her through nostalgia or guilt. "You have changed," they say, as if change were betrayal. But transformation always feels like betrayal to those who benefited from your smaller self. The queen recognizes this psychological tactic. She understands projection. She understands that when others accuse her of coldness, they are often grieving the loss of control. This awareness gives her a dangerous calmness. She does not argue with illusions anymore. She lets them dissolve in their own contradiction. There is a deeper layer to this stage that few discuss. When a woman stops seeking validation, she becomes a mirror. People see themselves more clearly in her presence because she is no longer distorting her identity to comfort them. This can be deeply unsettling. The insecure feel exposed. The manipulative feel powerless. The immature feel judged, even when she says nothing. Her stillness acts as a psychological spotlight. Carl Jung described the phenomenon of projection as the unconscious transfer of one's shadow onto another. The queen, now integrated with her own shadow, refuses to carry projections that are not hers. She returns them silently, and the tension in the room thickens. In the middle of this transformation, a profound loneliness appears. It is not the loneliness of abandonment, but the loneliness of elevation. When you rise in consciousness, you outgrow certain conversations, certain environments, certain dynamics. She begins to notice how much of her past was built on unconscious fear. Fear of being alone, fear of being misunderstood, fear of not being loved. And now that those fears no longer control her, she finds herself standing in unfamiliar territory. The silence becomes heavier. The nights become more introspective. She questions whether power is worth the isolation. This is the most dangerous moment of her awakening, because here, the temptation to return is strongest. It would be easy to become soft again, to laugh at disrespect, to tolerate inconsistency, to re-enter the comfortable cage of emotional dependency. The old world still welcomes her, but it requires her to shrink. The queen faces a choice, comfort or consciousness, and consciousness is expensive. It costs relationships, it costs illusions, it costs the version of herself that once felt safe in chaos. This is where suspense tightens around her transformation. Will she endure the solitude required for sovereignty, or will she retreat into familiarity? If she endures, something extraordinary happens. Her energy changes. She no longer seeks attention, yet attention follows her. She no longer demands respect, yet respect becomes inevitable. This is not manipulation. It is magnetism born from alignment. When inner conflict dissolves, outer dynamics reorganize. People either rise to meet her standards or quietly exit her life, and she allows both without resistance. She understands that forcing connection is a form of self-betrayal. Instead, she cultivates depth over drama, clarity over intensity, peace over performance. At this stage, the queen begins to understand a truth that reshapes her entire worldview. Love without self-respect is self-destruction. She no longer confuses sacrifice with devotion. She no longer mistakes obsession for passion. Her boundaries become sacred architecture, not defensive walls, but defined lines of honor. She speaks less, yet her words carry weight. She invests less, yet her presence feels rare. This is the psychological rebirth that dark psychology rarely admits. The most powerful person in the room is the one who needs nothing from it. And as she steps fully into this awareness, the final stage of awakening approaches, where caring itself transforms into something even more formidable. The final stage of her awakening is not loud, dramatic, or vengeful. It is quiet, composed, and almost invisible to those who do not look closely. This is where the queen truly stops caring, but not in the way the wounded interpret it. She stops caring about being misunderstood, She stops caring about correcting every false narrative. She stops caring about convincing others of her value. In Jungian terms, she has completed a profound cycle of individuation. The ego no longer begs for approval, and the shadow no longer demands revenge. Instead, a centered self emerges, stable and self-sufficient. Her presence feels different now, not because she tries to dominate, but because she no longer leaks energy into places that cannot honor it. At this level, her silence becomes deliberate strategy. She understands that explanation is often an invitation for debate. She no longer debates her standards, she embodies them. When confronted with disrespect, she does not explode. She withdraws access. When faced with manipulation, she does not argue, she disengages. This is where dark psychology reveals its most paradoxical truth. Indifference is more powerful than retaliation. Retaliation feeds conflict. Indifference starves it. The Queen has mastered emotional economy. She invests only where there is reciprocity. She gives only where there is growth. And she leaves without announcement when there is decay. People begin to feel her absence before it physically happens. Conversations with her are no longer chaotic. They are measured. Her laughter is genuine but rare. Her approval is not easily earned. Those who once took her for granted now sense a distance they cannot cross. Some will attempt grand gestures to pull her back into old dynamics. Others will criticize her transformation to protect their own comfort. But she sees through both. She understands that desperation often disguises itself as affection. She understands that criticism often masks insecurity. And because she sees clearly, she moves calmly. There is a moment, however, when the weight of her transformation presses against her heart. She looks at the ruins of past relationships and realizes she can never return to who she was. The innocence of unconscious love is gone. The thrill of chaotic passion no longer tempts her. She wonders if peace will always feel this solitary. This is the final psychological test. Not anger, not doubt, but nostalgia. Nostalgia whispers that the old intensity felt alive. It tries to romanticize the pain she once endured. For a brief second, the Queen feels the pull of her former self, the girl who cared too much. But then she remembers the cost. She remembers the sleepless nights, the self-questioning, the emotional exhaustion. She remembers shrinking to maintain connection, and clarity cuts through nostalgia like light through fog. She understands that growth always feels lonely before it feels liberating. The reason her new life feels quiet is because chaos is no longer screaming in her ears. The reason her circle feels smaller is because access is now earned. She is not isolated. She is refined. She is not cold. She is discerning, and discernment is the crown she now wears effortlessly. In this final stage, caring transforms into something sacred. She still loves, but her love is no longer desperate. She still gives, but her giving is intentional. She still feels deeply, but her emotions serve her wisdom rather than sabotage it. The Queen does not chase connection, she attracts alignment. She does not fear loss, she trusts replacement. She does not cling to potential, she evaluates reality. This psychological maturity shifts her entire energetic field. Those who are healed feel safe around her. Those who are fractured feel exposed. And she accepts both reactions without adjusting herself to soften the impact. The Queen stops caring about anything that requires her to betray herself. That is the final stage of awakening. It is not about superiority. It is about sovereignty. It is not about punishing others. It is about protecting inner peace. When a woman reaches this level of consciousness, she becomes untouchable not because no one can approach her, but because no one can manipulate her. She has faced her shadow, endured her loneliness, resisted nostalgia, and chosen wholeness. And if you recognize yourself in this transformation, understand that you are not becoming heartless. You are becoming whole. If you are benefiting from our topics, please subscribe, like, and turn on the bell notification so you can see our new videos early.